Today we're kickstarting off resolution recharge, and all right, perfect. It is green, woohoo, or not green anymore. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with resolution recharge. I'm actually going to see if I can get my screens. It's a little tricky in that I want to see the comments you guys share on Facebook, but I also want to see the comments from folks who are joining live in this right now. So I'm going to kind of do multiple windows here and see how this goes for all of us. Perfect. All right, a lot of maneuvering here. I'm not the most proficient with the Zoom plus Facebook Live combination. But without further ado, so we in February, so we've been doing these monthly challenges. For those of you guys who've attended these, watched these, if you're new to the group, welcome to the Epic Five Epic Clan community group, and we're so excited you're here. And we do these challenges monthly just to again have some more live connection. Hope to support you guys. It's probably just some different discussion topics that help you to grow personally and in your health and wellness. And I think for many of us, we realize that when we work on our health, even like our physical health, our diet, our hydration, our movement, managing our stress levels, working on our sleep routines and sleep hygiene, that we really are developing and growing ourselves as people. And so with this resolution recharge, I think is a really cool opportunity as we go into this month of as we're in the month of February, doing this week challenge. There's a lot of concepts here we're going to be going through that I think can be really great developmentally for us, that can not only apply directly to our health and our health habits, but really anything in life. So I hope for each of you guys, and even for myself as we go through discussions Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week in these lives, that get something really beneficial from it, that even if it's just one thing that sticks with you and helps you to grow as an individual and thrive. I think that's a hope and wish for all of us in all things. So today we called it resolution recharge because as a culture, this is kind of the time of the year when some of us, maybe many of us, set New Year's resolutions, and now we're starting to fizzle out in our momentum. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question here, but anybody who's watching, or wants to comment, please share your answer here. But how many of you guys actually did set a New Year's resolution this year? And then of you guys that raised your hand, so to speak, how many of you are still sticking with it now, at least to the degree that you're hoping for? So you might find yourself in a number of different places here. Some of us are didn't set one at all. Actually, that's me. Um, but didn't set one at all. I was like, oh yeah, it's the new year. I was off on my New Year's Eve and New Year's Day so badly this last time around. Some of you guys are actually, you have set a New Year's resolution and you actually are sticking with it. And I just want to say, just by word of encouragement, great job and congrats to you. I know that can be, for a lot of people, just a tough thing to approach well in a way that's sustainable. And so I think, especially when you're 6 weeks into the year, 6 to 7 weeks into the year, that's really commendable. And I just want to encourage you to keep it up, keep on going. I hope it's really helping to serve you. And yeah, keep going after it. So I already said that. And then for the rest of us, we set a goal, and now we're not meeting it now. Set an intention, a resolution, and we're already like, oh yeah, that was just a dream or something. And for some of us, maybe we were kind of expecting that, but we thought we'd give it a shot anyway. Maybe for some of you guys, like maybe we're a little bit down, disappointed. You know, I mean that makes sense. We set a goal. We had this going to this new year, and like, all right, we're gonna make this different. And then we come into the year, and then we realize like, it's not different. Like I'm still falling short the ways I've fallen short before, or yeah, this is a pattern in my life, and it starts to become a very personal thing and really kind of discouraging thing. So I want us to speak to that, and we want to call this resolution recharge to help reinvigorate and re-inspire you guys in those resolutions, not necessarily for resolution's sake, but in terms of just coming in with intentionality uh, and continuing on in your year. So with that said, basically, wanted to speak the fact that, yeah, it's true that I don't know where these statistics come from. It's from the Forbes magazine, um, but basically said about 80% of New Year's resolutions fail. 80%. So that's a lot of them. So if you are one of those folks, take heart knowing you're not alone, right? You are not alone. And I think when there's such a staggering percentage like that, there's got to be a reason for it, right? It's not just a coincidence. And there's plenty. I mean, you don't have to go far. I didn't have to go far in preparing for this day, this time today, to really look, into even just a few reasons of why that might be. I think a lot of people look into it and have some really interesting insights. And fortunately, thanks to the internet, share it with the world. And I think we can learn a thing or two from it. So we're going to dive into that today, and also just talk about, for some of you guys who, if you're our private clients, we have these things called Motivational Mondays, where health coaches just kind of hop on for a half hour, kind of speaking through various topics that would be relevant, hopefully to uplift, give perspective to, our private clients. And I know we spoke about having a better mindset and attitude when it comes to goal setting, or taking, making next action steps. So I want to review that, a bit of that today too, because again, it's one thing to just talk about concept and theory, but another thing to create some practical changes in terms of how we approach things. Even if that means it's how we approach things up here, can be very practical. So first of all, let's go a little bit further into why do most New Year's resolutions fail? And there's a lot we could cover, but I'm just gonna share a couple of highlights. And for those of you guys who, we're gonna have we usually have an ebook at the end as well, where we will highlight, the resources we used. But at the end of each of these videos, guys, we're gonna have a question for you, and we want you to comment, post comments to that question, and your participation in that, via the Facebook feed, I should clarify. And if you guys post comments there, we'll then open up some of those specific resource links to you guys, so you can, read further into it. So we'll have in there, a couple of these articles I'm referencing, and I might share my screen, on some of these today. So with that said, since I'll do a screen share, I'll get back to my Zoom side of things. So in fact, I'm gonna move Facebook to this side, so I keep an eye on the comments as you guys are going back and forth through this. Super. Okay. So the first one is, I want to just say, there's a number of good reasons. There's a couple of sides we'll look at. First, there's just some, like, I think fundamental, but basic, solid, practical things that can help us with New Year's resolutions or just our goals and intentions. Um, and there's also a headspace thing. I think these are, and of course, they're going to interlink with each other. So I want to kind of touch base on both. We'll see kind of where we go deeper with each of those today. But in terms of big picture concepts, we'll probably circle back to this later today. I'm not going to jump into it right now, but I wanted to read a really great paragraph to you guys. And I'm going to, see if I can share my screen here and pull it up for you. Here we go. All right, screen sharing. Top 3. So this is one person's article. Top 3 reasons New Year's resolutions fail and how yours can succeed. So author here is Kathy Caprino. And just doing a quick search of, this kind of topic. I just kind of stumbled upon this one. And I'll let you guys be able to, feel free to read this, the full article at a later time. But I just want to highlight this paragraph here. She said, over the past, here, I'll highlight this part. Over the past 15 years of my therapy and career coaching work, I've seen that most of us simply can't bring about significant change in our lives if one key thing is missing: understanding at a deep level why you operate the way you do, and recognizing what keeps you locked into specific kind of negative, self-sabotaging, or self-limiting behaviors that resist change. Once you understand more intimately your mindset, your values, your beliefs, your habits, your greatest fears, you'll begin to realize why certain goals are going to be very hard for you to achieve and even harder to sustain. That's a big one, right? Sustaining it, why so many of us putter out after a month into the year. unless you commit to a deeper level of change. So this is like, and I very much agree with this, even based on some other books I've been reading and other authors. And this is big stuff. And she goes into a few things in this article. So I think it's a great article to read. But yeah, it's true. If we don't really understand ourselves and why we think the way we think, what we believe, which affects how we think, which affects our emotions, affects how we, um, why we do what we do. If we don't really have much of an understanding there, yeah, I mean, not even just New Year's resolutions, but I imagine for many of us with a lot of things we try to do in life, we hit resistance. We quote unquote fail. We use that word on ourselves, and we feel like we can't become more the people that we want to become, because we lack that deep understanding. So I wanted to start with that kind of as a, I don't know, it's like a teaser, but just to think about that. How well do you understand yourself and what you believe is true about you, about the world, and what your patterns are, what your triggers are, right? That's some foundational groundwork. It's going to make it a lot easier to, when you create a goal or a plan, to focus it and understand how that's going to work for you rather than be for somebody else. So that's the first thing I just want to kind of point out there. And with that said, let's rewind the tape here a little bit. I'm going to go back up. Why else do New Year's resolutions fail, right? And I think it's important for us to remember first, why did you set a New Year's resolution? Why did why did we set a New Year's resolution? And how many of you guys set one because that's just what you do, right? It's a new year. What's your New Year's resolution? It's a cultural thing, a very deeply steeped one, and with added on stereotypical stuff of, I'm going to lose more weight and eat better. That's our culture, at least American culture. Um, and I think that probably speaks for most of us. And so if that's your reason, I mean, is that really a solid foundation to build that upon? Probably not, right? And I don't say that to judge, but we need to think critically of, why are we setting these New Year's resolutions? What do we hope them to do? What are they for? Is it the right timing? So that's another thing I want us to consider. I've set a New Year's resolution before too, and but we have to think about the timing of it. So is the new year a good time for you to think about this kind of stuff and want to set kind of into the year, like what you want to be different? Or is that the right kind of benchmark for you? Or is spring a better time of new beginnings for you to look at making some different changes in your life? Is like your birthday, when you get a year old, become a year older, at least on paper and on your ID, is that kind of a better time for you to like kind of take a benchmark moment to kind of reflect and think, what's happened last year? Where am I looking ahead to? Where am I headed? What do I want to be true? What do I want to see growing in? So I mean, I want us to all, I'm going to say us and you a lot. I go back and forth between the pronouns. I'm not sure which I prefer. I'm not a preacher speaking to you guys. I'm very much a part of this as anybody else too. Um, so anyway, thanks for bearing with me through my pronoun usage. But yeah, think about what do you want to do, and when is the right timing for you? And maybe January 1st is not that time, right? So think about that and give yourself some grace. Take a moment to step away from the natural pull of culture, and think of, what do you need and when. So think about, does this goal make sense based on your current reality? So that's another thing I want to look at too. A big reason why a lot of times goals, these New Year's resolutions, we find ourselves struggling through or failing or needing, like we lose motivation, is it ties back to that big picture part we talked about. And that is that, what if this goal you've created, or this plan, this intention, what if it's so big and it requires things that just aren't true in your current reality, that it's comparing apples to oranges. It's just not going to work, right? Let me see if I can, it's kind of vague. Let me see if I can pinpoint that further. Let's say that for a certain change to come in your life, um, it's going to automatically require that you have a rich community and support, right? But if you don't have that, like that's a huge, it's a huge foundational piece that's lacking. We need to build those foundations first. Social support is actually one of a number of reasons why these can fail. And actually, I'm going to open up another article for us. I want to skim through a few highlights here that kind of stood out to me as well. That's not it. One second, guys. Okay, take two. I have so many screen options now, trying to keep track of it all. There it is. Okay. Top 10 reasons why New Year's resolutions fail. I mean, there's so many of these articles, right? But we have to look at a number of things here. So a couple I'm going to speak a little bit more on here. Treating a marathon like a sprint. Don't believe in yourself. That kind of ties back into big picture. Let's see, a couple of the ones that stood out to me here is, not tracking progress. Yeah, no social support. That's a huge one. And you know your what, but not your why. There's a few other great reasons in here too, but those are a few that I wanted to highlight through. So let's kind of break it down a little bit further. So we need to know where we're headed. And I think a lot of times we want things to be true, but we slap New Year's resolution, that logo, onto it without thinking through much on the details, and we realize this is way bigger a bite than we can chew, or it is so many degrees off from who we are and our current reality and our capabilities that it doesn't fit, and we're not going to be able to do that. So we need to reel it back. So from there, let's talk about, for those of you guys who this isn't your first time through at a challenge, this is going to sound so cliche, but it's important. What is your big why? Okay. And actually, going back to that one article I just shared, it said, we know your what, but not your why. Before I get into that, I think with New Year's resolutions, I think this is a point that first author I pulled up in today's challenge brought this up too, is I want to say New Year's resolutions are not a bad thing. I know me saying that is sounding like I'm being contradictory. I think New Year's resolutions can be a great time, a tool to kind of think about big picture vision, dreaming, right? Creating a picture, what you want to see true or change in your life, doing an assessment, if you will. I think the danger we can fall into is that we make that New Year's resolution a goal, the action plan. And really we should instead start looking at themes. What are some themes that I want to see, that I notice in my life that I want to see change or improve or grow in? I'll give an example. I thought I kind of reflected last year and year before that, even the year before that, was like, been married a few years. I think it would be really wise if you start thinking about what would it look like to be more intentional in having dates with my wife, like intention. Now that we have a kid, and like that's a new thing for, relatively in the grand scope of our lives, a new thing. What would that look like? And we could start having conversations we could start creating some ideas around it. But notice it was more of a theme, an idea of like, I would like to broad picture, that could be a great area that would be really good in my life, for growth, great for my wife as well, and just for both us in our marriage. I mean, there's a lot of great things here. General tunnel vision, but the goal setting is a lot smaller, more specific. It needs to be. And I think that's where I think resolutions can be a great tool for processing and reflection. But where we can go wrong is, again, pulling the trigger and going, all right, we're gonna do like 3 dates a month and all this stuff, right? And we have no plan around it. There's no foundation. So we haven't thought far enough ahead. We just know this thing that would be nice to have, and we want it, and we don't lay these foundations. So that's a key distinction there. And why do you want it, right? And that's what the big why is all about. What was your resolution, or what is your resolution? Have you thought through why you want that? And I think many of us would say, well, yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have picked it. And I'd say, have you thought for more than 5 minutes about it? You said yes. What about 10 minutes? If yes, have you, after you answer the question why, have you asked yourself why once more? So if your goal is that you want to, you want to eat healthier in the year 2021, I'll just use a very relevant cliche, but still, again, really relevant example in our culture, let alone here at Epic Functional Medicine. We want to eat, have a healthier us with our diet in the year 2021. Okay, well, why? And like, well, I want to feel better. Okay, that's great. I want to feel better too. Why do you want to feel better? Well, I want to feel better because I mean, it'd just be nice, right? Like my day would be better and life would be easier. Okay, so why would life be easier? Why would your day be better? And when we start getting deeper into that, there's a degree of us where we might push back and go, isn't it obvious? And that's where, if you're talking to a friend across the table, they say, I don't know, is it? What do you think? And when you really start thinking about it, get specific, it's a lot more illuminating as to what it is you really want. And a lot of times, goals are a means to what we desire. So, or it can be if we're not being careful with it. So, think about that. Whatever reason you gave for why you want to do that New Year's resolution, or whatever that goal is that you've recently created for yourself, why do you want to do it? Whatever that answer is, ask yourself why once more. I think for most of us, we can go at least 2 levels deep. For some of us, 4 or 5. And that can take a while to really process through. So really think about that. When you get very detailed, what's I'm a detailed person, so maybe I'm biased here. But what's nice about details? Details give clarity. Details can allow you to engage your senses, your thoughts. Um, there's a really cool, I haven't gotten to really practice it much in my life yet, but a really cool technique, the art of visualization, right? Where you can really visualize what that thing is you're after. What does it look like? Picture, what in that example I gave, I want to eat better because I want to feel better. Because if I feel better, my day is going to be easier. If my day's easier, my life's better. Like, all right, so what do I picture there? It's true of my life. Um, what does that better day look like that I'm after and desire and want to see become more true? And once you get a clear picture of it, you can maybe even engage, as a mental exercise, like your vision, your hearing, the smell, touch, kind of the emotions and feelings that come with it. It becomes more real. And if it becomes more real, it can become more believable to be attainable. So there's a lot of layers to this, but it's going to become more feel more like this is something that you can in fact be able to grasp at some point and start to see become more reality at some point in your future. But if it's vague, it's going to stay vague in your life too. It's going to feel like you're chasing after something that you can't put your fingers around. It just falls through your fingers. Chasing after the wind, as some wise sayings say. So think about your big why. I know it's cliche. We need to do it. I need to be challenged in my own life of what is my big why for being healthy, and thinking through that. And sometimes we surprise ourselves. We think we know ourselves well, and actually, in a lot of ways, we don't, which is kind of weird and funny when you think about it. So think about the big why there. And again, simple exercise: give your answer, ask yourself why again. Give your answer, ask yourself why again. Go as deep as you can until you're just like pulling your hair out, like there's nothing more to it. That is what it is. All right. So that's a huge foundation. Many of us, when we go into New Year's resolutions, don't do that. We kind of skip ahead to the practical, the doing, because doing feels real. Doing feels like it gives us results, and those results are going to give us everything we want. But a lot of times without that foundation, the results don't actually sustain us, even though we believe that they will. So, so kind of, I'm kind of, I don't know if you guys are feeling it. I feel like I'm going a little bit everywhere today. So I'm going to reel it back and do a little bit of review before we move on, move on to the next points there. So first, we kind of talking about the fact that, you're not alone if you're already feeling like you're kind of not succeeding so well with your New Year's resolution. Or whatever that new thing was you said you were going to turn a new leaf on in the year 2021. Apparently up to 80% of us, that's the case. And if it's not 80%, the point is it's a really, really big number of us. Okay. Second, talking about there's big picture things about our mind, about knowing if we don't really understand ourselves, it's going to be really hard to pursue these bigger picture changes we want to see in our life. And even practically speaking too, we need to know why we want to do something before we go do it. It's the same thing as trying to shoot a target in an archery contest, but you don't know where the target is to begin with, right? How are you going to hit it? You've got, we run in and we're like, okay, we're in this archery competition. I'm thinking Robin Hood. I don't know where this is coming from. I'm thinking like Disney's Robin Hood or something. We're in this archery competition. So I've got the event in place. I've got my bow. I've got my arrow. Got my thing on, my name in the list. But I don't know where the target is. And so I'm shooting away and I'm working hard and getting nowhere with it. We need to know what that target is for us to get to it. That's what the big why is. It defines the target and makes it clear what we're after in the first place and where we're headed. So, so that's what we covered so far. We also talked about too, are you feeling pulled just because of what others want from you, or what you feel like you ought to want from yourself? Right? Like, my friends, my family, they got these New Year's resolutions, and that's a big thing. They're like, what's your New Year's resolution? You're like, well, and you feel you're put on the spot, and you're like, well, I want to, that maybe I should do that too. So if you feel like you're just kind of pressured into doing it, you're probably not going to do it long term anyway. I know I don't. If I don't want something, then why am I going to keep doing it? So think about that. Or was this something you wanted for yourself, or it's somebody else, or you feel just kind of as a cultural thing you felt pushed to do? And so I just encourage you to reevaluate and don't beat yourself up about it. Reevaluate. I'm sure there's something you want, and maybe now is the time, or maybe later, but it takes time to process through it. And think about timing as well. Is January 1st, or February for that matter, a great time for you to start making these changes or in your life that you're willing to make? Or would a different time be better? I know for some of us, winter's hard. January and February, depending on where we live, are some of like the toughest months out there, right? We can feel most depressed, feel stuck inside if it's cold out, feel like, feel more isolated, just feel bummed out, feel, I don't know, it's darker out. I mean, there's a lot of things. So maybe a different time of year is a better time for you to kind of start trying new things, So that's kind of a review of where we headed so far. I'm going to take, for those of you guys who are listening, thanks for hanging in there with me. Sue, Melissa, really appreciate you guys. And I'd love to hear any comments too, Facebook and Zoom. If you guys have anything to share, I'd love to kind of, invite you guys to be a part of the live discussion. But I'm going to take a sip of water here. And if you guys need a water break, let's do that. Okay, and I'm going to check Facebook real quick here, see if we have any comments as well. Looks like we are doing okay, and the screen is still not green, so we are doing great. Okay, so I want to talk a little about, before going back to kind of that teaser I gave about that first article, if we need to like understand ourselves, like why we self-sabotage, if we're gonna, what we believe. Before I get to that, I want to talk about just something really practical here next. So I think we've established that we need to really rethink why we do New Year's resolutions in the first place, right? I think it's been pretty clear, and go back to the big why. Why do we want to do what we do? But I think too, the problem is that I think as a culture, we are very familiar with the idea of New Year's resolutions or of turning a new leaf as the new year comes around and wanting to be intentional with changes in our life. But I think for a lot of us, we're not very well practiced with goal setting and making plans. Um, I know I speak in a lot. I speak in a lot of big, broad spoke generalities here because I'm speaking to a group of thousands of people. So again, I'm speaking in generalities here, but I feel confident that most of us would agree with that. That more of us than less, more than less of us are, could use some growth when it comes to how to create an action plan for ourselves that gives us structure and focus to grow in the areas we want to grow in, make the habit changes we want to make in our lives, in our diet, and our health, and our hydration, and all that good stuff. And so I want to just start talking a little bit about differences in perspective we can have around goal setting, and how we make goals, because that's part of the problem too, and that's ties back to one of the reasons that New Year's resolutions can fail. I don't like using that word, but it's a word that we often think and then like connect with in ourselves, and that is oftentimes we're making a goal and it's just huge. Like when else do we create this like massive goal where we're missing tons of steps on how to get from here to here? You know, it's like somebody's like, hey, you know, you're just coming into college. Your goal is to graduate. Good luck. And we had no guidance to that. Be like, oh, it's so much work. But it's like, no, we break it up, right? We break it up. There's 4 years. Each year has 2 semesters. I'm just going general, 2 semesters. Each semester we have a certain number of classes. Within those classes, there's an order we take those classes in. We have people there to advise, hopefully, on what classes you should be taking next. And then each class breaks it down. We have homework assigned. So there's so many steps to the process. But I think for a lot of us, New Year's resolutions kind of feels like, all right, by the end of this year, I'm going to graduate. It's like, but we don't have any of that infrastructure between then. We have to take things in smaller pieces. We need to scale it back. We're going to be talking more about SMART goals again later this week. So for you guys who are following along or watching these after they're recorded and you're just in the Facebook feed too, Tuesday, tomorrow, Natalie and another client of ours is going to talk more about using SMART goals as a specific tool to help create that focus and structure. I'm going to go over it really briefly, very, very briefly for overview, but I'm going to leave Natalie and company to go into the details there. And SMART goals aren't the only thing. It can be a great way to organize ourselves, but it is something that we can, excuse me, is something that's popular. We use with our private clients a lot too to give structure. And that is, we want to get specific on what that goal is, what that thing is we want to do. We need it to be measurable. So we have actual concrete timelines or durations of time, dates, all kinds of details there. So it actually becomes it becomes more specific than vague. And we need to check within ourselves to make sure it's achievable and realistic. So that's a huge part, right? New Year's resolution, that's not realistic, but this little step I can take that I can work on this next week, maybe that's realistic, okay? And then relevant, tying back to reminding ourselves over and over and over and over again, why is this action step, why does this goal matter in the first place, right? So it's tying back into our big why. And then T is for time bound. How long do I want to work on this before I hit the pause button and go, let's reassess. How have things been going? Is this a good plan? Or have I realized this is a terrible plan, but now I've learned why, and we're going to reassess. So now that's a brief overview of SMART goals. Now he's going to talk about more tomorrow. It's a great tool to make step-by-step growth, breaking down even your New Year's resolution to bite-sized pieces, more practical. But let's talk about goals, though. That's what I want to talk about today. Thinking about goals. Who here doesn't like that word? And if anybody in the comments and chat wants to say, I hate the word goal, I love to hear, or I dislike the word, right? I would love to hear in the comments in the chat, if you guys don't like that word. They're like, you know what, I wish that we didn't use the word goal. Not we as an epic necessarily, but just goals weren't a thing in general. And if so, why is that for you? What comes to your mind with goals that is a negative connotation? Now, not all of us have a bad relationship with that word, but I know can be a bit of a stigma around it. So I'd just be generally curious to hear, and I'd love you guys to comment on that. But I do want to address that because I think that is something that is a need to speak to. How we view goals. Some of us have a healthier relationship with goals and we can be more objective with it. But for a lot of us, there can be kind of an emotional, kind of visceral reaction to it, and we just don't want anything to do with goals. They cause stress, or maybe goals make you anxious, right? Or you feel like goals just push you to set yourself up for failure and disappointing yourself. Like, if I don't have something measurable to be measured by, then I can't fail because I didn't have a bar to shoot for, and so I can feel better about myself. But if I do have a goal, then I'm just going to fail it, or like it can mess with our heads. So first of all, I think a really helpful thing here is to just change the word. Sometimes changing the word can make all the difference. What if for you, if you're like, Dan, SMART goal, you guys are going to talk about that later, don't like the word goal, not into that. What if we called it a SMART plan? What if we called it SMART intentions? We don't even have to have the word SMART in it. We just called it, what's your plan? Hey, what are your intentions specifically? Hey, what's your next action step? What's that next thing you're going to do? How are you going to do that? Why are you doing that? I mean, that right there, plan, action plan, intentions, action steps. I'd love to hear some other great acronyms, some other great, what's the word I'm looking for? Synonyms. There we go. For what we could use in place of the word goal. And I think for maybe some of you guys, maybe that word switch is what you need to just be able to like kind of move through with a better headspace around it. Because I know, and I can relate, like for me, when I hear I have a better idea, especially because being a health coach here at Epic and we do SMART goals, talk about it a lot. I've definitely gotten to a better mindset with goals and how they can work for our benefit. But I can tell you guys that it wasn't always that way. Goals for me, one of my jobs was working I was managing in retail, and that was a hard job. I was in there 7 months before I switched to a different job, and I had been with the company longer in a lower level position. But once I got to the manager level, run the store, it was hard. It was really hard. And it was retail. We had sales goals every day. And we hit and it was like this roller coaster. We hit the goal. It's like, yeah, we did it. And then the next day, start all over. Like, well, we have a new goal. How are you doing on that today? Have you hit it? Or you're that far behind, like we need to catch up. And then every Monday we had meetings on the phone with the regional manager and going, where are you at with goal? Where are you at with goal? What's your plan with the goal? What's, hitting that sales number? It just felt so defeating day after day, feeling like the slate's washed clean. And with that too, just having a lot of anxiety because for me, a lot of time goals was numbers. Have you hit the number or not? I think goals don't have to be that way, although especially if you worked in corporate America or in any kind of job where it's like that, goals can often be numbers, obligations, reports, a report card. Like who enjoyed some of you guys enjoyed showing your report cards to your parents, I'm sure, but for many of us, like who wants to do that? And that's what it feels like. Goals don't need to be that way. And I just want to encourage you all and just want to emphasize that point. Goals do not need to be like that. But if it is a strong connection to your current or past with how goals are currently used in your life, don't use the word goal, just use a different word. And that's fine. Kind of how I needed to just change my ringtone to a different one after I left that job. So I could grow and associate my phone with something good rather than like, oh, shoot, what's my regional manager saying now that I need to do while I'm on call? So with that said, let's think of a different word if you need to. The other thing is, I just want to emphasize too, for perspectives, healthier perspectives around goal setting and action steps is, remember, guys, that creating goals or creating an action plan for yourself, next steps, they are to serve you, right? Um, yeah, they're there to serve you. These are tools. I think for a lot of us, we can create a goal, but soon we unintentionally become enslaved to it. We feel like it has become our master. I'm getting into like, I don't know. I feel like I'm preaching or something. It's not- but it becomes our master, and we feel like it's this thing we now have we owe to. We have this obligation towards, and it will determine if we're meeting that goal or we're not. If we're on point, on schedule. It will determine whether we can feel good about ourselves or feel not good about ourselves, our worth. There's so many things there's so much power we give over to goals, or can. I think and hope for some of you, you can identify with this. And if so, it doesn't need to be that way. It has no power. It's just a tool. It's meant to serve you. And if you don't like it, discard the tool and get a new one, or polish up the tool and make it better for you. So that's the other point I want to give toward better, healthier perspectives around setting goals and next steps. I'm just going to check the comments here, um, real quick. Pat, yeah, not a fan of the word goals. Ugh. Hey, Pat, I would love in the Facebook comments there if you want to, you don't have to share, but I'd love to hear for you, like what things come to your mind that make you feel with goals. I'm sure there are plenty of other people who could relate to you, who would just be like preaching to the choir. Yep, that is so true. So love for you to share. Thanks for popping that comment in there. Melissa, you said in the Zoom comments here, the master and obligation, giving power away. That is my big why I wasn't understanding or using the big why. Actually, Melissa, I'd love for you in the chat if you could explain further what you mean by that. I think I'm following along, but I'm not sure I fully do. But I think you're onto something. And
Hey,
actually, you know what? Why don't you just, yeah? Do you want to share now?
yeah, I think I wasn't using the big why because when I was a kid, first of all, my parents didn't really like questions, and sometimes I didn't really like when my kids asked questions, and I kind of wondered, why don't I like questions? Well, maybe because I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing, right? And so now I want to know exactly why I'm doing the things I'm doing, like eating the foods I'm eating. My kids say, "Oh, mom can't have that," and I say, "Well, no, I don't want to have that." Right? It's
Yeah.
different. It's the I can't have it is I can't because I have to meet my goals, right? Well, I don't want to eat that because I want to feel better and I want to put good food in my body. And looking at the why makes you look at what you eat today or what you put in your body today is going to affect you down the road. It's just neat.
That is cool. Thanks for, yeah. I realized I was like, you could just, yeah, I realized I was like talking about the comments. I was like, wait, you're on Zoom, so you could just say it. Thank you so much. Actually, so a couple things I love about what you said there, Melissa, is number one, it gives you, you get more confidence uh, if somebody goes ask you a question, you don't have to be afraid of that, which gives so much more confidence, especially in the realm of when we're interacting with people, our friends, our family. Because I know, like just even with Epic, working with private clients, and we're talking about making dietary changes, right, or whatever other changes. People are going to ask questions, and we could feel uncomfortable. But if you feel confident, like, yeah, this is why I'm doing this, it can create not only confidence in the as we interact with those folks, but we just build a personal confidence in ourselves, in those foundations. It's really true. I know that's one thing that if I don't really understand something well, um, it doesn't have to be in this context, but just anything I don't understand quite well enough, I just kind of have like in my head what to do, but not beyond that. I'm like, I hope nobody like puts a critique question up because I'm not going to know how to deal with it. And it's not easy or fun. Even like something informational, if I'm giving information to somebody, and then they're critically thinking through the information I'm telling them, they're like, so what about this then? Uh, I don't know, you know? So yeah, that's a huge one. Thanks for mentioning that. And I never thought about, I'm not sure if I've thought about the idea of, if questions are uncomfortable, maybe that means that we don't like questions because we're not sure ourselves. So that's actually a really good observation there, Melissa. I just encourage everybody else who's watching this, listening. Yeah, maybe that could be a a gut kind of a gut tool, is process through, like, if your gut feeling is you're not comfortable with those situations, or when somebody asks a question or challenges something, maybe that's revealing something in you, so definitely dig into that. That's awesome. um, so yeah, we were just talking about with yeah, feeling obligated to a goal versus it serving you. And you're right, like when we describe to other people, like what Melissa was saying, when we describe to other people like why we're doing what we're doing, it shouldn't be, oh, that's just because my goal, because that can become a target. People might criticize the goal and be like, ah, you don't need to do that. But if you make it about you, and in the back of your mind, you have a goal or a written plan or structure to help you with it. People that you interact, people you care about, your support people, right? Or who ought to be your support, can get behind wanting to support you. They might not care much about your goal. They don't even need to know about it, but they want to know how to support you. So that's a great point there, that was brought up. Cool. So let's just do a little rewind here as we start to land the plane for the day, and touch on a last big topic that is so big. I just want to touch on it, but um, it could be something that could be discussion for hours because it's pretty deep stuff. But we just want to review what are some more constructive perspectives we can have around goal setting, and how that ties back to New Year's resolutions is that many of us, we create these goals or these plans, and they're so big, they're not practical, they're not achievable, and therefore not sustainable. So we need to make it more smaller. To make it smaller and to keep our focus, we need to use some kind of thing to help us plan out and be organized about it. So SMART goals or other kind of goal setting tools can be a great way to do that. But what if we don't like the word goal? Think of a different word. What's my plan? What are my intentions? What's my next action step that I want to work on, that I'm excited to do because, and then we work on our big why, right? Because of X, Y, Z. So think of a different word if goal is a stumbling block for you, that word. And then also remember that goals are a tool to serve you, not the other way around. All right. And if it's the other way around, think through, process through why is that. So I think a theme that you guys might have picked up on, if this is not your first challenge or first time at Epic, is that opportunity to reflect and process through what's going on is really, really key to any kind of change we want to do in our lives. So we need to do that. So we covered a lot of different things today. And again, I've got a couple, we'll have some links and resources. So if you guys, I'm going to put I hope I'm doing this right. I'm going to put a question in the comments. And if it's not already there, I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. And for those who participate in it and want more information on the resources for today, put a message in, let us know. And I feel bad. We have a system for it, but I'm not the media manager. Natalie is. So we'll figure out how we get that information to you guys. But the last thing I want to talk about, so at the very beginning of today, I had mentioned the following quote. And that is, the quote was, just looking at my other screen, over the past 15 years and not me, but the author, my therapy and career coaching work, I've seen that most of us simply can't bring about significant change in our lives if one key thing is missing. Understanding a deep level why you operate the way you do and recognizing what keeps you locked in specific negative, self-sabotaging, or self-limiting behaviors that resist change. Once you understand more intimately your mindsets, your values, your beliefs, your habits, your fears, you'll begin to realize why certain goals can be very hard to achieve and even harder to sustain unless unless you commit to a deeper level um, of change in terms of understanding yourself. So I think in wrapping up today, it's important for each of us to discern, do I understand myself well? I think for many of us, we want to say, yeah. But if your gut says, maybe I don't, or you're actually like, yeah, you know what? I probably don't now that I hear that quote, that would be a good place to start. And I'm going to give you a tool, share a tool on that. And again, it's a huge topic. But if you're like, hey, I don't think that's much of an issue, um, I don't think anyway. Although Melissa, you brought up a good point. You're like, I thought I knew myself, and we're always growing. So we're always discovering how deep the rabbit hole goes in terms of who we are, why we do what we do, what we believe, what we believe. But if you're like, if you don't think that's as much of an area that you need growth in, you just need a little more practical tool in terms of just keeping things into more realistic bite-sized pieces. Then that understanding which camp you fall into is going to help determine what's your next step. So maybe before you get to a New Year's resolution, maybe you're like, I just need to do some soul searching first. Um, so with that said, there is a concept, and I put a blog. Actually, so this is not in the resources, but I just did a blog article on this, and I figured I can just share it because it's public. Let me take a moment to fish it out for you guys, and I'll put it in the Zoom chat and the Facebook chat here. Give me well, let me see if it's posted. It was a very new one. Okay, good. We got pulled up. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna put it in this part, and we'll put it in the Facebook chat as well. Okay, so you guys should have it. Hopefully it works there. So there is a concept called the wheel of belief. That's a name I know of it. It's actually not the first name I've heard of it. When I read the book Atomic Habits by the author James Clear, he talks about our identity and how we need to start with who we are, what we believe ourselves to be, our identity, to be the outflow of why we do what we do, rather than having what we do define who we are. Let's say that one more time. Who we are defining what we do instead of what we do defining who we are. All right. Um, the author Sarah Best, in her book Turning Off the Tap, basically, these are just two books I happen to be familiar with. I've read them recently just for coaching development. And she basically said the same thing, but nuanced it and explained it a little bit differently. But I'm hearing a theme here, and the wheel of belief is the same idea. I'll share my screen with you guys here, to the blog article that I did, uh, and just to show you guys the picture. Here we go. There's the picture. So here's the pic. Not my image or anything. I made sure to give credit where credit's due. But this is the same. It was interesting. We saw this online too in a discussion with my coworkers. We're like, oh my gosh, I've seen three different pictures, three different descriptions, three different names. They're all talking about the same kind of thing. Clearly, humanity is onto something when smart people are talking about the same thing, but they've never talked to each other on their own or in their own experiences. They come up with this. And that's this. We have this circle where beliefs feed into what we think, and our thoughts feed into what we feel. Our feelings fuel our actions, like why we do what we do. And our actions are going to create some kind of result. It could be great results, neutral, not so good results. Those results are then going to fuel, kind of feed back into or reinforce what we believe, right? We tend to do what we believe, um, and we tend to believe what we do. It goes back and forth. But here's the practical part. And again, this is like a huge topic, but I'm out of time here today. And I want to give you guys a starting point. This article could be a start for you, this blog article I did. And definitely those books I mentioned, even more so. But that is this. A lot of times, some of us might struggle with our emotions. We don't even quite know how to express our emotions. We feel them, but we haven't like processed it. But usually, if you're needing to discover more of who you are and why you do what you do, we need to go back to what we believe, why we believe what we believe. Uh, what do we believe in the first place? What we believe and our identity tend to be interlocked with each other. Okay. And if we need a foundation of understanding our identity and our beliefs to then be able to stem out to making lasting change in our lives. I'm speaking to any of you guys who feel like time and time and time again, you want to grow who you are and yet seem to just bounce right back to your old ways no matter what. So much so that you're like, why do I keep going? Why do I bother? I mean, if that's you, I just encourage you to listen right now. You're not alone. It's just that there's a disconnect between what you're trying to do and who you really believe yourself to be, or where you find your identity in. And once you get an understanding there, then we can start to have an understanding of where to go from that, right? So here's last thing I just want to share here before we wrap up today. It's probably like the third time I said the last thing, so thanks for bearing with me, guys. But we're usually starting here in this graphic with our actions. We look at we'll like I'll just do something different, and if I do the right things for long enough, I get the results I want. I'll become that person I want to be, and life's going to be great. But the problem is, we might do that for a time, but we might not sustain it. So, if we're needing to figure out, well, how do I even figure out what do I believe or what I think my identity is, right? Where do I start? We recommend Sarah Best in her book, Turning Off the Tap, recommended this. Start with your feelings. If Hopefully I'm not paraphrasing her, but start with your feelings, start with your emotions. Um, if you feel disappointment in yourself, or you were, you had that snack that you said you weren't going to have because you're changing your diet habits, right? Think, all right, well, how does that make me feel right now? Or what was I feeling right before that happened? What was the cause there? That's going to help connect back to what you were thinking. What were the thoughts that are leading to these emotions you feel? All right. So now we're getting up into our minds. And then once we get a grasp there, we think, well, why do I have those thoughts in the first place? Why do I think this particular way about the situation when somebody else might think a different way? And that'll help tie back to your beliefs. And then you can start to challenge your beliefs. Say, is that really true? Do I really believe that? Clearly, I've been acting upon that, but maybe it doesn't. What if I believe something different? What if it didn't have to be that? Um, and start from that. So that can be a way to kind of work backwards to self discovery there. And the more you understand this, I think the more you're going to make sense of why there's a disconnect between the stuff you're trying to do to make changes in your life versus who you really are, who you believe yourself to be, and how that's a disconnect. So, um, so sometimes belief, put another way, belief oftentimes that bridge that connects, that can connect knowing something and doing it. Like, I know I should eat a healthier diet, but I'm not doing it. Why am I not doing it? Well, maybe there's something I actually am not believing about that thing I know up in my head to be true, right? So, so yeah. Anyway, kind of big stuff here. There's a lot to it, and there's some great if you start kind of searching along these lines, I think you can find some wonderful tools. And again, those books I mentioned, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and then Turning Off the Tap by Sarah Best. Wonderful books, great authors who speak on this as kind of the initial stuff to lay foundations to their own methodologies too. So I'm going to stop the screen share here. And that's what we have for today, folks. So we covered a lot of stuff today. Thanks for bear with me for an hour chatting through. But yeah, practical takeaways. Think through, do you like the word goal? If you don't, think of a different word and create a more positive association with that instead. Maybe it's an action plan, an intention, a next step. If you're struggling with your New Year's resolution, or whatever that thing is you're hoping to do better with this year, and you already feel like you're failing, take a step back, reassess, make it realistic, and make sure that how you're approaching it in that step-by-step fashion is a tool for you rather than you serving the tool and therefore, quote unquote, enslaving yourself by it, right? Who needs that in their life? Nobody. And then think about, if you feel like there's a disconnect, you're trying to do something different, but it's this version of yourself you just aren't right now, or you don't know why you just go right back to old habits, then like every time it feels like, then think back to that wheel belief concept I spoke of right at the end here. And I've got the link to the blog article. And I will post, again, I think we have another place we post this question, but the question I'd love for all of you people to comment in the Facebook thread here is this. I'll put it right there. For an entry in our week raffle and to receive breakdown from today's call. So the YouTube, any YouTube links, resources I mentioned, the articles. Um, then think through, what thoughts or emotions come to your mind when somebody asks you to set a goal, and what's a different word for goal or mindset you would like to serve better. So think through that, and I'd love to see too here a couple of comments just to kind of go through. So Pat shared goals are a measurement of accomplishment. And I think for me, I think I sense that it's about my value that does come straight from my childhood, not measuring up. So it makes me feel pressure and anxious and afraid of not measuring up. Yeah, it's deep, right? I mean, I can, Pat, I'm so glad you shared. And I definitely think a lot of people can really relate to that because a lot of time, because again, what we tie what we do to our self-worth. And it's really easy to do that, right? It's a lot of, that's a lot of how our culture operates and just mankind in general. Um, and I already, somebody in the Zoom here, Pat, said they relate to that completely. So we're not alone here. Um, so thanks everybody for sharing today. Uh, very, 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 very last thing here is I just want to remind folks that we do have this is for at least practical for our private clients. We do have um, there's a promo we learned of on FullScript for a further 5% off on supplements, I believe tomorrow through Wednesday. So if you guys need a refill on any supplements through FullScript, that's a little thing that they're doing. Worked out kind of perfect with doing these live videos. So we just figured we'd give you guys a heads up and check that out if that's helpful for you. And also we will have as well, um, that is it. The other thing we have is a referral rewards program. So again, you guys are here in the Epic 5 community, whether you're a private client or not, you're here because you want to be a part of changing your community. You want to change your health and yourself. And so we'd love to work with you guys. We'd love to hear who you think would really benefit from working with us, so we can help you guys out. So and we want to reward you for that, to help make your care more even more affordable and practical for you too. So definitely check that out in our private group if you need more information. And with that said, that's it for announcements. Thanks for sticking with me as I was getting set up, and the green screen recording that has gone in and out of me. And tomorrow, Natalie and another client or two will pick up conversation, and we'll go from here. Take care and have a great day, everybody.